Well, hey, I got on the show today, Brendan Kennedy. Thank you for joining us and learning more about you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Brendan, what I want to do is really get to know you as an architect, you as a designer, and the offerings of Skyhook and kind of what you guys provide and do.
Right.
So I know you went to CU for your undergrad, and then you went off to another university for your architectural design. Where did you do that?
Well, I actually I got my undergraduate degree from CU Boulder in architecture. So
Okay.
I did not go to get a master's degree.
Okay.
I have thought about that quite a bit. I had a good opportunity to do that, but I was so tired of school and kind of burned out.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to take that next step. So once I graduated, I went and got a job as a carpenter.
All right.
And did that for probably 3 years, give or take. I felt like I needed to have some practical knowledge of how a building goes together, and that's how I was going to learn it.
Yeah.
So I did that for a while, and then once I felt like I wanted to step back into the design world, I hung up the tool belt.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that because there's a lot of architects that can design some amazing things, but you can't put them together.
Right.
You're just like, okay, come on. I mean, we've been doing this 25 years and we get some details. We're like, that doesn't work.
Right.
But,
Yeah, and I've worked for some people like that when I was younger, where I was like, this guy's a good designer, but yeah, they just don't know how to hammer two things together. Like, there's practical things that you need to know, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
well, tell me a little bit about why you chose architecture. What inspired you in your journey?
when I was in college, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to major in, and so I was taking lots of different classes and just all different kinds of fields. So I was taking science classes and engineering classes and art classes and just wasn't quite sure. And I took some architecture ones and they just resonated. And I was like, this is it. So I think looking back, I was probably born to do that.
Okay.
But at the time I didn't really know it quite yet.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up stepping into that. And once I did, it's like, oh, well, the glove fits. This will be a good thing to do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So after CU, you got out in carpenter. Tell me kind of your story, your journey.
So I had a pretty interesting job. So my first job was a guy, I won't mention his name, but he was one of the inventors of rock shocks, like the mountain bike shocks.
Oh, yeah.
And so he was a professional mountain biker and also a professional motocross mechanic guy. And so he basically thought, well, why don't we put motocross technology, like these amazing suspension systems, on a mountain bike? Like, brilliant idea.
Yeah.
No one had done that yet, so he did it. And so once I graduated, he had already, I think maybe even sold the RockShox company, but was still kind of involved with it on the periphery. And so he bought a lot. It's up kind of on the north side of Flagstaff Mountain in Boulder, and was building this amazing house because he did well for himself financially, obviously.
Selling that, yeah.
Exactly. So that was my first job, was doing construction on that house. So it was great because we did everything,
What was your role?
Well, I started off as like a laborer carpenter, and then as you buy your own tools, it's like, well, now I'm more of a carpenter because I have a skill saw and I have nail bags. And
I can charge more.
Exactly. So I kind of did everything. I mean, we were doing framing and concrete work and roofing and, anything that needed to be done. And then obviously there's all these other trades on there. So there's stonemasons and, guys doing plaster work and interior plaster work and real stucco on the outside. And so I just got to have this great exposure to all these different building trades. Yeah. And it was a, amazing project. Like, it's not like he had an unlimited budget, but he would pull the trigger on things that most people couldn't afford. So it was really cool to see all of that stuff, kind of coming to fruition.
Yeah.
For instance, he didn't like the hum that you get from your refrigerator when the compressor clicks on and off.
Okay.
And so he's like, I want to put the compressor down in the laundry room in the basement and then have all the lines run up to the fridge so that I never hear that noise. That's kind of cool. What a great idea. It probably cost him, $10,000 to do that. But it was neat to see that.
Who was the interior designer on that job?
I don't remember. This was like almost 30 years ago.
Because I've heard that story before.
Okay.
And I think it was from an interior designer.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to remember her name, but she's in Boulder.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty well known in Boulder.
Yeah, this is it. And I was sort of out of the circle of like, I don't even remember who the architect was at the time. But there were some cool things like that took place.
That's awesome. Being able to solve the intricacies of client expectations or ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And everything was kind of custom, so everyone had to think out of the box just to make the homeowner happy.
That's like when we're building a custom home, a lot of people are like, oh, you're just building a home. No, it's a prototype.
Right.
We're integrating systems, all these different types of ideas and technologies and building science and customer desire. And
right.
So it gets, I think we're as much a custom home builder as we are a system integrator.
Absolutely.
And so that's I think what we enjoy about being a custom home builder.
Yeah, so, you're conducting a big orchestra basically, and everything needs to come together in the right way for it to work.
Yeah. So, okay, so you're in the bags on phase of your life.
Yep.
And then?
So after I felt like I had acquired enough practical knowledge, I knew I didn't want to be hammering nails and carrying sheets of plywood forever.
Yeah.
I decided to apply for some architecture jobs. So I ended up working for a number of small firms in the Boulder area, and then kind of moved onward from that. So I worked for some mid-sized firms around the area. I worked for a huge firm in Denver. I think at the time we were probably the biggest firm in the state.
Oh, wow.
And so that was really all commercial projects. So we did university buildings and hospitals and office towers and multifamily projects and libraries and museums and things like that. So that was a great experience because just of the diversity and the types of commercial projects was really great. And then, you got so much exposure to different project types and construction types. Like the only thing they didn't do is single family residential, which is obviously the world I'm in now with you.
Yeah.
But it was still a great experience to do that. And, like we worked on the Modern Art Museum or Contemporary Art Museum in Denver, and the Denver Art Museum, like the big, titanium clad inverted pyramid thing.
That's cool.
So like this was kind of random, but one of my friends was the assistant superintendent for the construction of the Denver Art Museum. So I got to take tours of that thing when it was being built, and got to go up on the roof and lay down on there's the prow that overhangs the road.
Oh yeah.
And lay down on the corner of the prow and look down onto the road. And,
oh no!
I mean, I got to
inside look.
Yeah, I
cool.
got to see some cool stuff on that project.
That's awesome.
So
then you said at some point, okay, big firms. I'm a number. Cool, interesting projects.
Right.
Then you decided to say what?
So the thing that I didn't love about the commercial project world is one project could last 5 or 6 years. So if you're if you're on, let's say, a university library, you could be on that from design to the day that they finish construction. That could be 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. And
that's all you're doing. So that wore on me a little bit. I kind of liked smaller projects and, having stuff be done quicker and moving on to something else.
Yeah.
So I got a job at a mid-sized firm in Boulder where all we did was design. So that was super fun. And then worked there for a few years. And then that was right when the economy kind of crashed.
2008.
Exactly.
We all know it well.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I started there, the firm was probably about 100 people maybe, give or take. And then I got laid off, maybe the third or fourth round of layoffs. I think there was 12 people left in the company. I mean, they almost closed the doors, and they'd been around for probably 30 or 40 years at that point. So it just decimated, that industry. It was rough for everybody. So I just had my first kid right when that happened. So I stayed home with him for about 6 months, and then started up my own business, and have been doing that since then. So it's been about 15 years that I've had Skyhook Design and been working for myself.
So with Skyhook, your projects and your services range quite often, right? To small remodels, to full home designs. Mm-hmm. And there's also another interesting piece that you also specialize in cabinetry.
Correct.
Right? So tell me why Skyhook got into that cabinetry expertise.
I had worked for a design build construction company in the Boulder area. And so I was their in-house architect at the time. And because it was design build, I was integrated into like the full process from beginning to the end. And cabinetry was one of the things that we did. And so I had to do quite a bit of that, which I found that I enjoyed. And so once I went out on my own, the cabinetry was just a nice way to diversify and also get out of the office a little bit. So my job is 98% of the time sitting at the computer, drawing, designing, computer models, stuff like that. And so the cabinetry was fun because it gets me out into the field. It puts me into the construction realm a little bit more, which is just a nice break, a nice way to mix things up. And I just have always enjoyed cabinetry. And it's kind of a nice, it lends itself to being a nice design feature too. So.
All right. So tell me about the Skyhook. Why, that's kind of a joke in the construction world. Like, go get me a board stretcher,
right?
Or get me the Skyhook so I can, just lift that beam. Tell me about your inspiration for that.
So that's exactly where it came from, basically.
Okay.
So I would, have some idea, and the engineer would say, "Oh, how are you going to hold that up with a Skyhook?" And I'm like, "Oh, I like that. Yes, let's do that. That sounds like a good option."
Yeah.
So I just thought that was a cool idea, and that's what inspired the name.
Go get the left-handed hammer.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So thinking about things a little differently, maybe prioritizing creativity over functionality sometimes. Things like that.
What sets you apart over the past 15 years in what you do?
Mm-hmm. That's a tough question to answer. I think it's a few things. I think having the construction background and knowledge is a huge thing that probably does set me apart from quite a few others. It influences every part of the design process, but especially when people want to do things efficiently, when people want to do things a little differently. It just allows me to have that knowledge to fall back on. So I think the construction knowledge is pretty huge. I think there's good, bad, and terrible people in every profession. There's good doctors, there's bad doctors, there's terrible doctors. Same thing for contractors, engineers, accountants, like you name it. And so, not to like be boastful, but we're good. We fall in the good category.
Yeah.
And plus just the experience. I mean, I've been doing it for so long that it's become kind of second nature almost, especially in the residential world, where things can be a little bit more predictable and kind of easier to manage. Yeah. So I think that's one thing. And then, just the name Skyhook, like myself and the people who end up working with me, I try to promote creativity and promote thinking outside the box and doing things a little bit differently. I don't want to do 1,000 spec homes that are all like the ABCD version of one house plan. Yeah. That doesn't really interest me. Not that that's a bad thing. It just isn't my cup of tea. Yeah. So I like to do things that are a little bit more unique, a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, we'll talk more on that because that's the renovation,
right?
The remodel, the addition arena. But let's go back to the good doctor, bad doctor, horrible doctor.
Right.
From your perspective, being an architect for the last 15 years, what makes a good contractor?
So I think having the primary thing is probably having a really good construction knowledge. And that goes a long way because when I work with a contractor, I want them to know more than I do. If I propose something, I want them to say, yeah, that'll work, but what if we do it this way instead because that's more efficient or that's easier for these reasons? Great, perfect, let's do that. So I love getting that kind of feedback instead of me suggesting something and just getting a blank look and they're like, well, we'll talk to the subs, I don't really know how we'll do that. And you can just tell that the construction knowledge maybe isn't there or the experience isn't there.
Okay.
So I think that's hugely important. And then some of the other things would be being really good at communication, not just with me, but with the client. I think anytime I've had projects go south or had issues, it's almost always a communication issue.
Yeah.
And so when the communication is really good, everyone succeeds, everyone's life is easier, everyone's smiling at the end of the project. So I think communications is key. And that kind of builds trust along the process too. And that's really what all of these relationships are based on.
Yeah.
So, and I think addition to that, obviously they need to do a good job. They have to have good subs who come in and do good work. Everyone gets hung up on price, but from my experience, if you line up 3 contractors and they're all doing the same level of quality work and all offering kind of the same services, they're going to be within 1 or 2% of each other from a cost standpoint. So cost really doesn't factor in it quite as much.
It's that level of service and quality that you want and are willing to pay for.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think those are the big things. And then transparency is good too. I kind of like relationships and it helps build trust where the client can see where all the costs are going for the project.
Yeah.
When they can say, hey, if I want paint grade doors versus stain grade doors, what's the cost difference going to be? And they can show them exactly what that looks like.
Yeah.
And then they can make educated decisions. So I think the transparency is pretty key.
Yeah. No, that's good. Interesting to hear from an architect's perspective. Hey, what makes a good contractor when you want to bring somebody onto the team?
Right, for sure.
Thanks for listening to Built by Insights. Tune in next Friday to hear the second episode.